The bread is still warm. It will still be warm, in a manner of speaking. Almost 2,000 years from now, when a team of archaeologists in the city of Naples opens a sealed room deep beneath a layer of volcanic ash and finds 81 loaves arranged in the oven of a bakery on the Via dell'Abbondanza, carbonized but intact, their round scored tops exactly as they were left by the baker who put them in. The oven was still hot when the ash arrived. The bread never made it to the counter, but right now, in the early morning of the 24th of August, in the year 79 of the Common Era, the bread is simply bread. It is warm and fragrant, and the baker Modestus has been at work since before dawn. And the first customers of the morning are already gathering at the counter of his shop on the main street of Pompeii. You are one of them. You live here. You have always lived here, in this city of 20,000 people on the Bay of Naples, in the shadow of the mountain that the locals simply call Mons Vesuvius, the mountain, the one that has always been there, the one whose slopes are covered in the most productive vineyards in Campania, the one that nobody, in the entire recorded history of Rome, has ever seen do anything except sit there in the distance and look like a mountain. It is summer. The bay is blue and calm. The air smells of salt and sea, and the bread from Modestus's oven, and, faintly, of the fish sauce that is the city's most important export, the sharp, fermented scent that perfumes every market and every back alley and every wind that comes off the sea. Tonight, this journey carries you through the last ordinary morning of one of the most extraordinary cities the ancient world ever built. Close your eyes if you like. Pompeii will carry you. Chapter 1. Dawn, the city that wakes. The 24th of August begins the way every summer day in Pompeii begins with sound. Not the alarm of something wrong. The sound of a city assembling itself, piece by piece, in the dark before the sun clears the mountains to the east. The clatter of wagon wheels on the basalt paving stones, because carts are only allowed inside the city walls at night, and the last of them are making their deliveries now, before sunrise, before the city prohibits them for the day. Their iron-rimmed wheels on the rough stone make a sound that you have heard every morning of your life, a grinding rhythm that means the city's food supply is moving, that the bakeries will have flour, that the markets will have goods. Then, the wagons are gone, and the sun comes up, and Pompeii begins. The city stirs from the bottom up. First, the slaves, who are already at work before the households they serve, have finished sleeping, fetching water from the fountains at the corners of the insulae, the apartment blocks, carrying amphorae on their shoulders in the early gray light, the water sloshing and cold. There are 40 public fountains in Pompeii, fed by an aqueduct that taps the springs of the Apennines 15 miles away and delivers clean water under pressure to every corner of the city. This is not a small thing. In most of the ancient world, water is something you carry from a river or a well. Here, it arrives. A small daily miracle that no one in Pompeii particularly notices. The shops open in sequence along the Via dell'Abbondanza, the street of abundance, the main artery of the city, running from the Forum in the west to the eastern walls. The wood and metal shutters come down with a series of crashes, each one folding and stacking against the walls, leaving the shopfront open to the street. By the time the sun is fully up, the Via dell'Abbondanza is a canyon of open storefronts, the bakeries, the wine shops, the cloth merchants, the jewelers, the felt makers, the metalsmiths, all of them open, all of them shouting their existence to anyone walking by. You step out of your doorway into this. The street is alive already, though the morning is still cool. You cross carefully. Pompeii's streets are not pleasant at ground level. The city has no central drainage system in the modern sense, and the streets collect everything: rainwater, waste, the runoff from the workshops and the tanneries and the kitchens. The Romans solved this in a characteristically practical way. They raised the sidewalks higher than the street surface, creating a channel in the road for the water and the filth to flow. And they placed large stepping stones at the major crossings, flat-topped blocks of basalt, spaced precisely far enough apart for a foot, close enough together for a stride. You have crossed these stepping stones thousands of times. You cross them now without looking down, knowing where each one is. On the wall, at the corner of your block, 3 feet from your door, someone has painted a political announcement in red letters, Marcus Holconius Rufus, for Aedile. The word is still bright. It was painted recently, because the municipal elections are in a few months, and the walls of Pompeii are its social media, its billboards, its public forum. Every blank surface in the city is covered. Candidates' names in red and black, their qualifications listed by their supporters. All the fruit sellers endorse Gaius Cuspius Pansa for Aedile. The bakers and their neighbors ask you to support Gnaeus Helvius Sabinus. Sometimes the messages are less official. Someone has scratched into the plaster below the election. Notice a single word that translates, roughly, as something you would not repeat in polite company. Directed at a person named Restitutus. Below that, in a different hand, a couplet. Whoever loves, let him flourish. Let him perish who knows not love. This is Pompeii's voice. Loud, opinionated, political, romantic, argumentative, funny, every wall is a conversation. The city talks to itself in plaster and paint and scratched stone, and has been talking to itself this way for as long as anyone can remember. The morning is already full. Chapter 2. The streets what the stones remember. Walk west on the Via dell'Abbondanza toward the Forum, and you walk through the memory of the city. The basalt paving stones under your feet are worn into shallow ruts by 2 centuries of wagon wheels, the same routes traveled so many times that the stone itself has memorized. The ruts run parallel, precisely the width of a Roman cart axle, and they go on for blocks. These pressed channels in the hardest stone the builders could find. Evidence of the volume and the routine of commerce in a prosperous city that has been prosperous for a very long time. Pompeii is old. Not Rome. Old Rome is eternal. Rome has been a city for 700 years, but old in the way a provincial city is old when it has been lucky. It was an Oscan settlement before the Romans came. Before that, perhaps Etruscan. The walls of some of the older houses in the city predate Julius Caesar. The oldest temple in the Forum was consecrated before Alexander the Great was born. The city has layers, and if you pay attention as you walk, you can read them: the older volcanic stone of the foundations, the newer tufa and brick of the upper structures. The patches where the earthquake 17 years ago cracked and shifted things that have been rebuilt since in slightly different materials. The new work still slightly paler than the old. There was a great earthquake in the 62nd year. You were young then, or perhaps not yet born. The older residents of the city remember it the way the ground moved, for minutes, not seconds. The temple of Jupiter cracked from foundation to roof. The Stabian baths partially collapsed. The water system ruptured. The city spent years rebuilding, and some of the rebuilding is still ongoing. There are sections of wall near the Forum where the plaster is new and bright, and scaffolding stands against the upper courses of a building that was still being repaired when this morning began. These things are simply part of the city. They are not omens. The streets of Pompeii are busy now. The morning foot traffic has reached its peak. The hours between sunrise and midday are when the city does its business, before the afternoon heat drives everyone inside for the long Roman rest. The people moving around you are the full cross-section of the city. The well-dressed merchant in his clean toga, moving quickly toward a meeting at the Forum, the slave with a heavy amphora balanced on his shoulder, the old woman at the door of the Fulonica, the laundry, pouring the contents of the collection jars into the stone vats where cloth will be treaded with human feet. The 2 boys running somewhere they are probably not supposed to be, the widow, at the shrine of the Lars, at the corner of her block, making a small morning offering of flowers and a piece of bread. The shrine is one of many. Pompeii is a deeply religious city in the particular way of all Roman cities, which is to say that the gods are everywhere, present in every crossroads and every doorway and every fire and every river. And the daily life of the city moves around this presence the way water moves around stones. The Lars are the household gods, the protectors of the home and the street and the neighborhood. Their small painted shrines appear at corners and in courtyards and above doorways. Their painted figures raising their hands in a gesture of blessing that has become so familiar, it is no longer consciously interpreted. It is simply part of the visual texture of the city. Like the election notices and the stepping stones and the smell of bread, you pass all of this. You know all of this. It is the 4th day before the calends of September by the Roman calendar. An ordinary day in high summer, the kind of day that leaves no particular mark on memory. You walk toward the Forum. Chapter 3. The Forum, the heart of the city. The Forum of Pompeii opens before you at the end of the Via dell'Abbondanza, and even after a lifetime of walking into it, the space stops you for a moment. It is enormous, 200 feet long, 100 feet wide, paved in travertine marble that reflects the morning sun in long, hot rectangles of white light. On 3 sides it is flanked by colonnade, rows of columns, 2 stories, the lower Doric, the upper Ionic, the whole structure designed to frame the space and contain it and give it the weight that public life requires. On the north end, at the far end from where you enter, the Temple of Jupiter dominates the skyline, a high podium, a deep portico, the columns rising 40 feet, the pediment and roof visible above everything. Behind the temple, rising above and beyond it, visible from any point in the Forum, is the mountain, Vesuvius. It is, this morning, exactly what it always is, a mountain. A blue-gray shape on the northern horizon, rounded at the top, its slopes textured with the vineyards that produce the wine this region is famous for throughout the Roman world. At this distance from the Forum, it looks completely inert, the way a mountain always looks, massive and still and present and entirely unremarkable. Clouds sometimes form around its upper slopes. This morning there are no clouds. The sky above it is a clear and brilliant blue. You do not look at it for more than a second. You look at the Forum. The Forum is already busy at this hour. It is always busy. This is the amphitheater of daily Roman civic life, the place where the law courts sit, and the elections are held, and the business contracts are signed, and the political gossip circulates, and the priests of Jupiter make their morning sacrifices. Around the colonnade, the Macellum, the covered market, is open, selling meat and fish, and the seasonal produce of the Campanian countryside, which in August means figs and late summer vegetables, and the preserved fish that is the foundation of the Roman diet. The smell is complex here. The raw meat from the butchers, the salt and brine of the fish, the smoke from the sacrificial altar on the steps of the temple, the incense of the smaller temples on the Forum's edges. The Macellum has a curious round structure at its center, a circular pavilion with a domed roof, open at the sides, inside which the fish vendors set up their slab tables. The dome lets in light from above. Around its interior walls, the paint is still bright, panels showing fish and sea creatures, octopuses and squid, and the species of the Gulf of Naples. All of them rendered in the particular style of Roman decorative painting: flat, outlined, vivid, confident. Someone painted this with pleasure. You can feel the pleasure in the precision of the scaled fish, in the curve of the tentacles, in the way the painter gave each creature a slightly separate personality. The Forum has its regular morning characters. The money changers at their tables under the colonnade, their stacks of coins sorted and arranged. their calculating expressions as they evaluate the worn edges of the coins brought to them for exchange. The advocates, the lawyers in their togas, conferring before the basilica that serves as the city's main courtroom, their voices careful and rehearsed. The group of young men near the temple steps, who are ostensibly engaged in philosophical discussion, but are actually watching the girls crossing the forum on their way to the market. At the south end of the forum, the basilica is already in session. The basilica is the main hall of Roman civic law, a long, high-ceilinged building with a raised tribunal at the far end where the Duumviri, the two elected magistrates who govern Pompeii, hear cases and render judgments. From the doorway, you can see the advocates at work, the lawyers of Pompeii, men who have studied rhetoric in Naples or Rome and returned to practice in the familiar civic theater of their home city, pacing slowly as they speak. Their togas, arranged with the practiced casualness of people who have spent years learning to look effortless in a toga. The cases today involve a dispute about a wall between two properties on the Via di Nola. These are the properties, disputes that take up most of the basilica's calendar, the boundaries and the debts and the obligations of an ordinary commercial city, and a matter involving a loan and a contested signature on a wax tablet that the defendant claims to be a forgery. These are not dramatic cases. The advocates make them sound as dramatic as possible, because the forum is a performance space as much as a legal institution, and an advocate who bores his audience is an advocate who loses. You do not have business in the basilica today. You walk past it. The sun is climbing now. The travertine marble is beginning to radiate heat. Time to find something to eat. Chapter 4. The Thermopolium fast food of the ancient world. There are 83 Thermopolia in Pompeii. You know the one you want. Everyone has their Thermopolium, the counter where they go most mornings, where the owner knows what they usually order, where the neighborhood happens at the counter, the way neighborhood always happens, wherever people are forced to stand in proximity with a cup of something warm in their hands. Yours is on a side street, 1 block from the forum, run by a woman whose name you have known your whole life and whose face you have stopped seeing because it is too familiar. One of those faces that has become part of the background architecture of a life. The Thermopolium is built into the street-facing wall of a building, open to the exterior. The counter is L-shaped, made of masonry, faced with fragments of marble set into colored plaster in the geometric patterns that the Romans use for every horizontal surface they want to make look permanent. In the counter, set into holes cut in the marble top, are the large terracotta vessels, the dolia, in which the food is kept warm. There are 6 of them in the counter at your Thermopolium, each one containing something different. You know what they contain, without being told. You have read this counter for years, the way you read a face. The vessels contain a bean stew with herbs, spelt porridge with honey and dried fruit, a mixture of lentils, and something smoked. Yesterday's bread cut in pieces and soaked in wine and oil, which sounds worse than it is. A wine of the local variety, darker than Falernian, mixed with a small amount of water and warmed over the coals beneath the counter. And something you have never entirely identified, but that you eat regularly because it is there and it is warm, and by the time you have identified it, you have finished it. You stand at the counter. Most of Pompeii's working people eat most of their meals this way. The insulae, the apartment blocks that house most of the city's population, have no kitchens. Or rather, they have the equipment to heat very small things over a small portable brazier, but nothing resembling a kitchen in any serious sense. Open flames in crowded wooden upper stories are a fire risk the city has learned to avoid, and so the practical result is that most people in Pompeii eat out at the Thermopolium in the morning, at the Macellum or the tavern, or another Thermopolium at midday, at whatever can be assembled cold in the evening. The city feeds on itself in this way. A distributed kitchen of dozens of counters and stalls and shops, each one serving a particular block and a particular clientele. This means that the Thermopolium is not just a food stall. It is the place where you find out what happened overnight. Who argued with whom in the apartment above the fuller's workshop? Which of the candidates for aedile has been seen behaving in ways inconsistent with his stated platform? What the latest news is from Rome word travels slowly, a week by fast courier from the capital, but it travels. And when it arrives at the Forum and the Thermopolium in more or less the same moment. This morning the news is about nothing in particular. There is news from Rome about nothing in particular. There is news about the election candidates' more endorsements. A new piece of graffiti discovered this morning that someone apparently painted in the night. There is news about the earthquake last week. Yes, there was an earthquake last week. A small one of the small ones, that happened with some regularity in this part of Campania. Enough to rattle the dishes but not enough to fall down anything that hasn't already fallen. These small earthquakes are simply part of living here, the way the stepping stones across the street are simply part of living here. The way the mountain on the horizon is simply part of living here. You finish your food. You put your cup on the counter. The morning continues. Chapter 5. The Artisans, the city at work. Pompeii is not a resort. This is a persistent misunderstanding about this city that will survive into the distant future. The idea that Pompeii was a pleasure city, a vacation destination for wealthy Romans from the capital, a place of leisure and excess, frozen in the middle of an indulgent afternoon. The truth is more interesting than that. Pompeii is a working city, a trading city, a manufacturing city that produces goods for the entire Western Roman Empire and ships them out of the port of Stabiae, a few miles south, in large-bellied cargo vessels that traverse the Mediterranean and bring Campanian wine and Pompeian garum to dinner tables in Gaul and North Africa and the eastern provinces. The city is wealthy because it works. And on this Tuesday morning in August, the work is visible everywhere you walk. The Fulonica on the Via degli Augustali, the laundry is in full operation by mid-morning, and it is one of the city's great civic olfactory experiences, which is to say that you smell it before you see it. The full ones, the laundry workers, use fermented urine to clean cloth, collecting it from public urination jars placed strategically around the neighborhood, and this morning, several workers are standing in shallow stone vats, treading the cloth with their bare feet in the foul-smelling liquid, while others hang the cleaned and dried fabric over the wooden frames in the open courtyard to bleach in the sun. This is skilled work. A good Fulonica can restore a toga to its proper white, can clean and refinish a bolt of expensive cloth, can return something expensive to the condition of new. The smell is simply the cost of the service, and the smell is simply part of the street. And nobody walking past it lifts their toga over their nose. The garum shop, near the Via Consolare, is the other great olfactory landmark of Pompeii. Garum, the fermented fish sauce, that is the foundational condiment of Roman cooking, the thing that goes on everything, the thing without which Roman food is simply not Roman food, is made by layering whole small fish with salt in large clay pots and leaving them to ferment in the sun for weeks or months. The resulting liquid is strained out and bottled. The resulting smell during the production process is extraordinary. The city regulates where garum can be made and stores the fermenting pots away from residential areas where possible. None of this entirely solves the smell, but garum from Pompeii is exported to every corner of the Roman world, and the pottery kilns on the outskirts of the city produce the distinctive Pompeian amphora, the storage and transport jar by the thousand to hold it, and the fishermen of the Gulf of Naples feed the factory, and the whole machine runs with the efficiency of something that has been working for generations. There are the potters and the terra sigillata workshops producing the fine red tableware that is standard across the Roman dining table. There are the metalworkers on the Via dei Teatri who work in bronze and iron, making everything from door hinges to surgical instruments to the small bronze oil lamps that light every room in every house in the city. There are the weavers and the cloth merchants and the dyers who work with the murex shells from the bay to produce the purple that is still, at this point in history, a color of status and significance. And there are the bakers, always the bakers. Pompeii has 31 bakeries, a remarkable number for a city of 20,000 people, reflecting both the population's dependence on commercial bread and the productive capacity of the farms in the Campanian plain. The mills are attached to the bakeries, the large conical lava stone mills driven by donkeys, which you can sometimes hear before you reach the bakery, the sound of the millstone on millstone, a grinding that seems to come from somewhere below the street. The flour goes directly from the mill to the kneading trough to the oven, still warm, still carrying the mineral smell of the volcanic stone that ground it, the bread of Modestus. The bread of every baker on every street, still warm this morning, still waiting for the people who will not come. You do not think about this. You have no reason to think about this. You walk on. Chapter 6. The baths, the afternoon ritual. By the time the sun reaches its highest point and the city begins to slow, you have been in motion since dawn. This is the rhythm of Roman time. The morning is for work, the negotium, the Latin word that means both business and the absence of leisure, the root of the word negotiation, the activity that defines the productive hours. And then, somewhere around the 7th or 8th hour of the Roman day, what we might call 1 or 2 in the afternoon, the negotium ends and the odium begins, the leisure, the rest. The long, warm pause in the middle of the day that is not laziness but culture, the acknowledged and formal recognition that a city in the heat of a Campanian August needs to stop and breathe. The Stabian baths are the oldest and largest in Pompeii, built in the 2nd century before the Common Era, expanded and renovated several times since, still bearing the marks of the earthquake of 62 in the repaired sections of the colonnade around the exercise court. You have been coming here your whole life. Your father brought you here as a child. You know which floor tile has a slight wobble, which alcove in the changing room has a hook on the wall that nobody uses, which attendant is genuinely helpful, and which one will shortchange you on the oil if you do not watch. You pay your small fee at the entrance. The baths are technically free to women, a modest charge to men, and you enter the apoditerium, the changing room. The stone shelves and niches along the walls hold the clothing and sandals of the people already inside. You add yours. You take the oil flask from the attendant. Romans do not use soap, they use oil. You coat your skin with olive oil from the small flask, then pass through to the exercise court, the palestra, where some of the afternoon bathers are engaged in a mild game involving a ball and a great deal of shouting, and others are simply walking in the shade of the colonnade, conducting the conversational business that cannot easily be conducted in a forum or a shop. The palestra is where deals happen, where political alliances are formed, where the social information of the city circulates in the lazy afternoon heat. Then, the sequence of rooms. The tepidarium, first, the warm room, heated by the hypocaust beneath the floor, where warm air from the furnaces outside circulates under the raised tiles, heating the floor to a comfortable warmth that rises through your feet and begins to loosen everything the morning has tightened. The room is tiled in geometric patterns. The light comes through high windows set in the thick walls. The sound in here is muffled, the splash of water somewhere ahead, the low voices of the other bathers, the occasional scrape of a striggle as someone removes the oil and sweat from their skin with the curved metal tool that replaces the washcloth. Then the caldarium, the hot room, the steam, the plunge pool of hot water that makes your skin sing and your muscles release and your mind go blank in the particular good blank way that the body demands after a long day of working in a warm city. The caldarium is the social center of the baths. The hot water loosens conversation, the same way it loosens muscles. And here is where you hear the real news of the day. The intimate version that doesn't make it to the forum or the Thermopolium. Births and deaths and marriages and scandals and the small negotiations of the city's social life. And then the frigidarium, the cold plunge, the shock of cold water after the heat, which the Romans understand as both tonic and seal, the way you close the pores you have just opened, the way you return to the ordinary temperature of the world refreshed and clean and slightly more present than you were before. You emerge from the baths into the afternoon. The sun is still high. The city is coming back to life after the midday rest. The shop fronts are reopening. The streets are filling again. You are clean. You are warm. You are unhurried. This is, in the language of Roman daily life, a good afternoon. Chapter 7. The houses, the world behind the walls. The most interesting thing about a Roman city is what you cannot see from the street. The street-facing walls of the houses of Pompeii are mostly blank, undecorated, unpierced, presenting a face of plain plaster or stone to the public world outside. The shop entrances are open and loud and commercial. But the houses themselves are turned inward, away from the street, their richness contained inside walls that give nothing away to the passerby. Step through a doorway, through the fosses, the narrow entrance corridor, and everything changes. The domus, the traditional Roman house, is organized around two open spaces. The first is the atrium, a rectangular room with a rectangular opening in the roof, the compluvium, through which the sky is visible and the rain falls into the shallow pool below it, the impluvium, which collects the water and reflects the light. The atrium is both functional and ceremonial. It is where the household gods have their shrine, where the family's wax portraits of its ancestors are displayed, where clients come in the morning to greet the paterfamilias and establish their daily relationship of social obligation. Beyond the atrium, through a wider doorway, is the garden. In the houses of Pompeii, the garden is the heart. The peristyle garden is surrounded by a colonnade, the columns painted in the colors that Pompeian painters love, deep red, yellow ochre, black, the particular blue that they make from ground lapis and copper, and the garden itself is planted with roses and laurel and rosemary, and the vegetables and herbs that the household uses. In the larger houses, the garden has a formal design paths, statuary, a fountain, fed by the city's aqueduct. The sound of moving water that makes every summer afternoon in these houses into something close to paradise. In the smaller houses, the garden is a courtyard, a few pots of herbs, a fig tree, a bench in the shade. The walls inside the houses are where the wealth goes. Pompeian painters are among the most skilled decorative artists of the ancient world, and the walls of the houses of this city are their gallery. The great mythological paintings Narcissus at the pool, the loves of Jupiter, the labors of Hercules, the Trojan war scenes in the triclinium are painted with a confidence and a fluency that still, 2,000 years later, makes the viewer stop. But it is the smaller things that hold you longest. The painted garden on the walls of the House of the Golden Bracelet, where a real garden meets its painted double in a continuous illusion of green. The still life panels a glass vessel with green figs, a silver wine cup, a dead thrush on a marble ledge, painted with such precise observation that the condensation on the glass is visible. The cave Canaan mosaic in the entrance of the house of the tragic poet, the black dog on the white mosaic floor, the words "Beware of dog" in the tesserae beneath its feet, that has been guarding this doorway for over a century. In the afternoon light, filtered through the garden colonnade, the colors on the walls are at their most saturated. The red that Pompeian red is named for, a color so specific and so persistent that 2,000 years from now, it will still bear this city's name. The deep warm red of iron oxide mixed with clay and ground to powder and suspended in the lime plaster, painted wet so that the color bonds into the wall itself and cannot be removed without taking the wall apart. You sit in a garden somewhere in this city, perhaps yours, perhaps someone else's. The fountain runs, the fig tree makes shade, the wall behind you is red as fire. The city is quiet in this hour. The shops will reopen soon. The evening will begin. Chapter 8. May. The children of Pompeii. There are children everywhere in Pompeii. This is a young city in the demographic sense that all pre-modern cities are young, high birth rates, high child mortality. The result, a population in which a very large proportion of the living are under the age of 15. You see them everywhere, in the streets, in the atria, in the schoolrooms adjacent to the forum, where boys sit on wooden stools and practice their letters on wax tablets, while the teacher moves between them with a pointer and the patience of someone who has been explaining the same thing since before the children in front of him were born. The writing tablets are one of the most ordinary objects in a child's day, and one of the strangest objects to contemplate in retrospect. They are wooden frames, 2 inches deep, filled with beeswax. The wax makes the writing surface, and the stylus scratches the letters into it, and when the wax is smoothed, the surface is clear again, and ready for the next lesson. Portable, reusable, cheap, the Roman equivalent of a notebook, except that the notebooks are erased and reused thousands of times, leaving no record behind. Unless the child decides to scratch something into the wood underneath the wax, where the teacher won't see it, which some of them do. In the houses, the children have toys. The archaeological record of Pompeii will eventually yield, in the houses and the corridors and the ash-sealed rooms of the city, a remarkable collection of children's objects. Small clay dolls with articulated limbs, movable arms and legs that can be posed, wooden tops, terracotta animals, horses, dogs, oxen, small enough for a child's hand. Knucklebones, the ancient gaming pieces, made from the actual knuckle joints of sheep, polished smooth by years of handling. Glass marbles. Miniature kitchen equipment in bronze tiny pots and amphoras that might be toys or might be votive offerings or might be both simultaneously. The line between those categories being thinner in the Roman world than in ours. There is a girl in this city whose doll will be found beside her. This is a fact that is not known yet, on this morning, by anyone in Pompeii. It will be known in the distant future, when the people of that future open the layer of ash and find, in the position and the proportion of the bones, a child, and in the space where her hands are folded, the ivory doll, with its movable arms and its painted face. You do not know this yet. No one in Pompeii knows this yet. The girl is somewhere in this city, this morning, playing. The boys near the forum are playing a game that involves a line drawn in the dust and a great deal of running and shouting. The game is unclear to an outsider, but seems to have rules that all parties understand and dispute simultaneously. They are playing with the complete absorption of children who have forgotten that anything else exists, that there is a city around them, that there are adults with business, that there are things to do and places to be. They are only here, only this, only the game and the shouting and the warm dust and the afternoon turning toward evening. You watch them for a moment. Then you walk on. Chapter 9. The mountain, what no one knows. From the top of the city walls, on the north side of Pompeii, you can see Vesuvius clearly. It is a large mountain. Not exceptionally large, the Alps are larger, the great peaks of the Apennines are larger, but substantial, rounded, wide at the base. Its upper slopes, rising to a double peak that is visible from the sea on a clear day for many miles. The mountain is green. This is the thing that people from outside the region always remark upon. They expect a dramatic, dark, forbidding thing, and what they find is a green mountain, terraced with vineyards, almost to the summit, the slopes cultivated and productive. the whole mountain radiating the particular agricultural abundance of volcanic soil that has been resting long enough to become extraordinarily fertile. The Romans have a word for the quality of volcanic soil. They understand that certain regions near certain mountains produce wine and grain and fruit of an unusual richness, and they associate this with the heat that rises from the earth in those places, the hot springs, and the smoking vents, and the mud pools that bubble and steam near the coast. They call the region the Phlegraean Fields, the Burning Fields, and they know it as a place of divine presence, perhaps the entrance to the underworld, certainly a place where the boundary between the ordinary world and whatever lies beneath it is unusually thin. The geographers and the natural philosophers have written about these phenomena. Strabo noted, a century before this morning, that the top of Vesuvius appeared to have been burned at some point, that the rock formations at the summit suggested the action of fire. But Strabo concluded that the fires were extinguished long ago, and that the mountain was now simply a mountain. There is no word in the Latin language for what Vesuvius is. The concept does not yet exist. Vulcanus is the god of fire and the forge, the deity of the smiths, the Roman equivalent of Hephaestus. But a mountain that has fire inside it, a mountain that is itself a kind of geological furnace, this thing has no name in Latin, because it has never needed a name. The people of Pompeii and Herculaneum and Stabii have lived in the shadow of this mountain for generations without event. Their grandparents lived here, their grandparents' grandparents. The mountain has always been there. The mountain has always been green. The earthquakes are something else. The earthquakes have a name, seismos, from the Greek, which is the educated word, the word the philosophers use. Everyone in this region knows earthquakes. The ground moves here, sometimes gently and sometimes less gently, and the buildings crack and are repaired, and the dishes fall from the shelves, and the dogs bark, and then it is over. The earthquake of '62 was the worst in living memory 17 years ago now, still partly visible in the repaired sections of the city walls and the newer plaster on some of the forum buildings. But the city absorbed it. The city was rebuilt. The engineers came from Naples and from Rome, and the city was made new again, and now it is more prosperous than it was before, and the earthquake is history, and the mountain is simply a mountain. This morning, from the north wall of the city, Vesuvius is the same as it has been every morning you have ever looked at it. The vineyards on its slopes are heavy with the late summer grapes. The harvest will begin in a few weeks. The wine merchants are already negotiating the prices for the season's yield. You look at the mountain for a moment, then you look away. There is nothing to see. Chapter 10. Barosi. The last evening. The sun is dropping behind the hills to the west of the city when the evening begins. The shops close in reverse order of how they opened the wine shops last. Because the wine shops are where the day ends, where the men who have been working since before dawn gather for the hour between the end of work and the beginning of night. The benches in the wine shops fill up. The conversation from inside spills out onto the street. Someone at a table near the door has a game of dice going, and the sound of the dice on the wooden table is the sound of the Roman evening, familiar and rhythmic, punctuated by the occasional groan or bark of laughter. The streets take on the different quality of the evening, the light softer, the shadows longer, the heat of the day stored in the stones under your feet, and still radiating upward into the cooling air. The Bay of Naples, visible to the south from the higher streets of the city, is turning gold in the western light. The small boats of the fishermen already out for the night catch, their lamps floating on the dark water like fallen stars. Dinner in Pompeii happens in the evening, and it happens slowly. The Romans have no word for a quick meal. At the end of the day, the cena, the main evening meal, is the meal that takes time, that is eaten reclining in the triclinium, the dining room, on the angled couches arranged around the central table, the food brought out in courses by the household slaves. The food is Roman food: the olives and oil, the flatbreads with garum and herbs, the fish from the morning's catch, the roasted meat, if the occasion warrants. The figs that are at their peak in this late August week, heavy and dark and sweet. The houses smell of this food in the evening, the olive oil in the lamps, the roasting over the small kitchen hearth, the herbs from the garden cut fresh and scattered on the table. The smell comes through the walls and into the street where you walk, a domestic warmth that is not meant for you but that reaches you anyway. In the working-class neighborhoods, the insulae, the evening is less formal. The benches in the streets fill with the residents of the upper floors, the ones without gardens, the ones for whom the street is the extension of the apartment that is too small to hold the whole evening. They eat from the Thermopolium, or from what can be assembled on a small brazier, or from what a neighbor has shared. The children are still running. Children are always still running. Even when the adults have stopped, and the older women talk in the doorways with the particular authority of women who have been watching this street for decades and know everything that happens on it. The graffiti on the walls picks up the lamplight now, the painted letters in red and black, more vivid in the warm low light than in the flat brightness of midday. Whoever loves, let him flourish. Marcus Holconius Rufus, for Adile. Restitutus, the messages of a city talking to itself in the dark, saying what it always says, leaving its marks in the stone, the way living things always leave their marks in the world that will outlast them. The slaves of the larger houses are doing the last tasks of the day, banking the coals under the kitchen hearth, shutting the heavy wooden shutters over the shop fronts, closing the main doors of the domus, and sliding the iron bar across. The door locks of Pompeii are sophisticated, the keys are heavy and iron, beautifully made, and some households carry them everywhere, as a matter of status as much as security. On the ring of a prosperous merchant, the house key hangs alongside the ring of the family seal and the small amulet against the evil eye that every Roman wears without particularly thinking about it. The way they wear their name. The fountains at the street corners continue to run. They run all night. The water system of Pompeii does not stop. The aqueduct from the hills continues to push water through the lead pipes under the city streets, the pressure constant, the supply continuous. The overflow from the street fountains drains down the step channels and out through the city walls. The sound of running water is one of the permanent sounds of Pompeii day and night, in every season, in every weather. It has been part of the city's soundscape for so long that the residents do not hear it anymore. They would notice its absence. They do not notice its presence. The stars begin to appear. Pompeii, in August, has the stars of the Mediterranean summer, the sky clear and dark above the city's lamplight. The stars of Scorpius low in the south, the bright ones that the Romans named after gods and heroes and the animals that populate their cosmology. The fishermen navigate by them. The farmers read them for the planting seasons. The philosophers argue about their nature and their distances, and whether they are fires or gods or something else entirely. Most people in Pompeii simply see them as the roof of the world, the fixed points above the moving life of the city, present every night, and therefore in their presence reassuring. The Bay of Naples is dark now. The fishing lamps on the water, the city of Naples visible to the north, as a scattered light along the coast. To the east, the dark mass of Vesuvius has become the darker darkness of a mountain at night, shapeless, large, present. Its outline is still visible against the sky on clear nights, a familiar shadow. Tonight it is simply there. The last of the wine shops closes. The dice game ends. The street empties. The city breathes in the particular way of a city in the middle of a warm night, slowly, deeply. The sound of it dropping to the wind in the alleys, and the fountain running somewhere, and the distant bark of a dog, and then silence. A silence that is not empty but inhabited. The silence of 20,000 people asleep. You are among them. The stones under the city are warm from the day's sun. and they will stay warm through the night, and the morning will come again. And the bread will be in the oven, and the city will wake as it always wakes, piece by piece, sound by sound, light by light. You do not know what tomorrow brings. None of them do. You sleep. Conclusion. What the ash kept. The eruption began the following afternoon. It began around the first hour of the afternoon, roughly noon, by modern reckoning, or perhaps a little after, on the 24th of August, the year 79. A column of ash and gas rose from the summit of Vesuvius to a height of 20 miles, visible from Rome, visible from the entire Bay of Naples. A Roman admiral named Pliny the Elder, commander of the fleet at Misenum on the far side of the bay, saw it and sailed toward it to observe and to rescue survivors. He did not survive the attempt. His nephew, Pliny the Younger, remained at Misenum and watched the column from across the water and wrote about it in 2 letters that have survived intact for nearly 2,000 years. They are the only eyewitness account of what happened. He compared the shape of the column to a pine tree, a massive trunk rising straight up and then expanding into a wide crown at the top. The column collapsed several times in the night, each collapse sending a surge of superheated gas and ash down the slopes of the mountain at speeds that made no distinction between stone and flesh. Pompeii was buried under 15 feet of pumice and ash in roughly 18 hours. Of the 20,000 people in the city, perhaps 2,000 did not escape in time. Some of their bodies are still there, preserved in the positions they were in when the ash overtook them, the ash hardening around them, and then, over the centuries, the bodies decomposing inside the hardened shell and leaving a hollow in the exact shape of a human being. In the 1800s, an archaeologist named Giuseppe Fiorelli realized that if you poured liquid plaster into these hollows, you could recover the form of the person inside the clothes, the expression, the posture of the last moment. The plaster casts of Pompeii are among the most disturbing objects in archaeology. Not because they are violent, they are often remarkably peaceful. The people who suffocated in the gas surge frequently in postures of sleep. But because they are so specifically, so precisely, so unignorably human, a man sheltering his face with his arm, a family grouped together, the larger bodies over the smaller ones. A dog, still chained, curled at the end of its chain, and what the ash kept, in the houses and the shops and the streets, the bread in the oven of Modestus, the baker. 81 round loaves, carbonized and intact, still in the oven where they were put to bake on the morning of the 24th of August. The election notices on the walls. All the fruit sellers endorse Gaius Cuspius Pansa. The bakers and their neighbors ask you to support Gnaeus Helvius Sabinus. The graffiti, whoever loves, let him flourish. Let him perish who knows not love. The ivory doll with its movable arms, the knucklebone dice on the table of the wine shop, the glass marbles, the wax writing tablets with the children's practice letters still faintly visible in the wood beneath, the fish counter of the Macellum with its painted octopuses and squid, the cave canem mosaic in the doorway of the house. Of the tragic poet, the black dog on the white background, the words still clear, the red walls, the names. They were real people. They woke up that morning, and they ate breakfast, and they walked to the forum, and they stood at the Thermopolium counter, and they talked about the election and the small earthquake last week and the price of the harvest. They had houses with gardens and walls painted red, and children who played in the street, and favorite seats in the baths, and the particular comfort of a city they had lived in their whole lives. They had plans for the following day. The ash kept them. In a way that was not intended, and that no one would have chosen. The ash kept everything: the bread, the words on the walls, the doll, the colors on the walls that were still wet when the morning ended. This is what the story is for, to walk through the ordinary hours before the ash arrived, to hold the city as it was for the people who lived in it. The prosperous, loud, fragrant, political, affectionate, argumentative city that did not know it was about to become the most visited archaeological site in the world. They were real. They had names. They had bread in the oven. Rest now.